Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Lunch Orders, where we're going to be talking to Chris Cheers, who I will introduce in just a moment. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. For Chris and I in this space today, that's the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. But I imagine that you're tuning in from a variety of different places and invite you to take a minute to pay your own respects to elders past and present and spend a minute just in gratitude and reflection for the land that always was, always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Beck Kavanagh. I'm the Youth Programming Manager here at the Wheeler Centre and the host of Lunch Orders. I would also like to thank VATE, the Victorian Association of the Teaching of English, who are our education partners for this series and providing the teacher's notes that will come out when we've released all 4 episodes. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest for today, Chris Cheers, who is a psychologist and educator based in Melbourne. He is passionate about creating accessible, accepting and safe spaces where people become empowered to reach their life goals. Through extensive training and lived experience, Chris has also developed expertise in providing individual psychology services and workshops to artists and creatives and the LGBTIQ+ community. Chris is also the author of this excellent book, The New Rule Book, which we will be discussing in some detail today. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Beck.
So I'm going to hand over to you and you're going to give us a bit of a soapbox and then we'll have a chat.
Thank you. I'll get on my soapbox. I'd also like to start by acknowledging these lands of the Kulin Nation we're on this morning and acknowledge the lands, the traditional lands that you're coming from, watching this today. And when I do that, I always like to acknowledge too the long history of supporting mental health within First Nations cultures, around the world, but certainly within Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures here, in so-called Australia, when, obviously the words we talk about in terms of, self-care or caring for your emotions, or we use different words in psychology, but when you think about what makes good well-being when it comes to connection to kinship, to community, to land, these are all things that have been practiced on these lands for tens of thousands of years. And it's always useful to acknowledge that when we acknowledge these lands as well. So on this soapbox, what am I going to talk about today? Well, when it comes to body, I'm going to talk about 2 main areas. I'm going to talk about the body and mind connection, and I'm also going to talk about body acceptance. So that first one, what do I mean when I say body-mind connection? Well, a lot of the time, we actually think about these things as quite opposite than connected. We tend to think in the body of the brain as separate. So think about the language we sometimes use. We talk about physical health versus mental health. We sometimes talk about mind over matter. These ideas that these things are separate. Now, sometimes this is helpful. It's helpful to talk about mental health if it means that we're bringing into focus the idea that we need to care for our mental health just like our physical health. But I think the problem of seeing them as a separate is we tend to kind of lose focus that they're actually part of the same system. Your brain is in your body. And why that's helpful to notice is when we're working with our mental health, sometimes we have to start with the body. So what do I mean when I say that? Well, when I talk about starting with the body, have a think right now, you in your body, you're probably listening to me right now, but take your attention off me and just move your attention to your body. Just notice it there. And you can notice already one thing, your emotions. How is it feeling? Sometimes we forget that our emotions are actually not in our brain. Our emotions are in our body. So just check in with your emotions right now. I'll do it. I'm talking for 10 minutes on a video, so I'm a little bit stressed. I might notice a little bit of anxiety. And it's interesting, as soon as I name those emotions, they actually become less overwhelming. And this is a really important step, what I mean by starting with the body. Sometimes, and psychology is as bad a player in this as any, we tend to focus a little too much on therapy when we have mental health issues. That, if you're going through depression or anxiety or something difficult, you should go and get a psychologist and go and get therapy. Now, obviously, that's very helpful. I'm a psychologist. I'm going to say therapy is helpful. But there's another part of this which is really helpful that we have to keep focus on, that to look after your mental health, sometimes a therapist is helpful, but all the time, what's helpful is to check in with your body and check in with what you need. So do that right now. Check in with your body and just think, what is it telling me I need? Is it a bit more sleep? Is it to go for a run? Is it you're hungry? Is it, there's a bit of anger or frustration there because someone said something that disrespected you, and then maybe you need to take action to rectify that. This is what I mean about starting with body. Sometimes to know what we need to listen to our body first rather than looking outwards to the people around us to tell us what we need, or all the expectations around you right now that are probably telling you that you need to live a particular way. To look after your mental health, I think these 3 questions I ask myself almost every day are really helpful to me. What am I feeling? Why does it make sense that I feel like this? And what do I need? So I'd welcome you to sort of ask yourself those questions today and most days, and then try and do the work to kind of give yourself space to give your body what it needs. And you might notice in there, I talked a lot about emotions. And I think that's another really important part of this as well, that sometimes when we separate body and mind, we sort of forget that our emotions, this incredibly important part of mental health and well-being, are physiological experiences. They're right there in your body. So listening to them is where we can start to work with our mental health. So let's take stress, for example. So if you're feeling stress, sometimes you might feel like the way out of stress is to try and, change the thing that's causing you stress, or talk to someone about your stress. But you might notice sometimes if you talk to someone about your stress, it sometimes doesn't make you less stressed. It might make you more angry or more stressed. Sometimes talking helps us process emotions. Sometimes. But sometimes what we need to do to process stress is actually use our body. So stress is something that's happening in your body. It's a normal process of your body. And it's been there for, tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, because it's part of evolution. Think about, when a lion was running towards a cave person, their body had to tell them to run away. And that's why you have this stress response. You have this thing that tells you to run away from the lion. And you might have heard of the fight or flight response. Your body's getting ready to run or it's getting ready to fight. Now, today you might not have a lot of lions around you running after you. Sometimes we don't have a lot of physical threats in our environment. Sometimes what we have is this frontal lobe, which actually creates threats. You walk into a social situation, there might not be any threats there, but your brain imagines that people are thinking bad things about you or people don't like you. Our brain is amazing at imagining threats. Everyone's brain is. It's there for a reason because it's trying to protect you. So what do we do with that information? We'll know that if your brain is imagining a threat, if you're in fight or flight response, what do you do to get through it? Well, you have to do like a cave person. You have to run or you have to fight. Now, I don't mean you need to fight the people in the room when you're feeling socially anxious. But what I do mean is you need to do something with your body to process the stress. So that might look like going for a run or doing some exercise or, punching a pillow or doing something physical. And you'll find that when you do that, you process the stress, and that's how you can feel grounded. Flight, when you want to run away, sometimes that's about going for a bike ride or going for a walk or going for a run. That will help you process the stress, and then you feel more grounded. So when you're feeling stressed or anxious or worried, listen to your body and let that tell you what you need, and then try and think, how can you do that? Because in the end, good well-being doesn't come from feeling happy all the time. I hate to tell you, that's just not possible. Good well-being comes from knowing that your emotions are really normal and knowing what you can do to manage them and kind of riding that wave of the natural up and down of emotions that we all go through. So that's the brain and body connection. Maybe try and think of them as the same. The second thing I want to talk to you about is body acceptance. So what do I mean by that? To accept our bodies. Well, I think the most important way to think about body acceptance is actually notice what we do instead. And to let you know that it's really normal if you, just like me, when you look in the mirror, you don't see your body with a lot of positive affirmation. If you don't look at your body and think, I love my body, I want you to know that that's really normal and that's okay. Because a lot of us have quite self-critical thoughts when we look at our body. And to know why, we don't have to look very far. Just look at the media and the environment around you. We're sort of trained to compare our bodies to others. Like, think about social media. Think about the number of bodies that you're seeing every day on social media. And the thing with social media is it doesn't tend to show a diversity of bodies. It doesn't tend to show lots of different bodies. It tends to show a certain type of body. which is often white and cisgendered and thin. These kind of ideas of what it is to be beautiful. So just imagine if you're seeing that time and time again, what that does to your idea of what is normal. And that means that if you're having self-critical thoughts about your body, it's really normal to have those because they're just a reflection against all the comparison that maybe the online environment or the media is asking you to do. Plus, think about how we talk about bodies. Like, how we talk about bodies actually changes the way we feel about our own bodies. So think about, your friends, your family. Are you giving them compliments about their body all the time? Are you talking about people's bodies behind their back? Because sometimes changing the way you talk about bodies might be a really good way in to feeling good about your body. So how do we, if this is where we're, often at, this idea of like self-criticism when it comes to our body, what do we do instead? Well, sometimes we're kind of taught this idea of being body positive, to just love your body. And I want you to know, if body positivity and being told to love your body is helpful for you, then stick to it. It's a great concept. If it's working for you, that's awesome. But for a lot of people, especially people who are feeling really critical about their body, being told to just love your body doesn't actually feel helpful. It actually feels like a step way too far. To go from like body hatred all the way to body love might just seem too far. Or also it might make you feel guilty or blame yourself for why you're not loving your body. And if body positivity is making you deny how you're actually feeling and pretend that you're loving your body when you're really not, then that's never helpful because it's actually asking you to deny how you're actually feeling. So what's the alternative? Well, theorists and psychologists and somatic therapists in this area have come up with this other idea, which they refer to as body acceptance or body neutrality. And what's that? Well, if you've got body hatred on one end, body love on the other, body acceptance is kind of somewhere in the middle. It's this space where you can just accept your body for what it is. And have a think about that. What is your body? What does it do for you? This is what body acceptance is all about. Moving the focus from what it looks like, or you want to change what it looks like, to moving your focus to actually, what does my body do for me? And how can I care for my body? So in a way, we often talk about the function of the body here. So how can you move your focus to the function of the body? So rather than looking at your body and think, oh, I wish it looked different, try and look at your body and go, what does my body do for me? When has it allowed me to, win a sporting event, climb a mountain, dance? When does my body allow me to see people that I love? What does your body do for you? And when it comes to mental health, it's amazing to consider that your body is the thing that can actually improve your mental health and well-being. Because the three things that often we find in research, and if you look on research over decades, the things that predict you to have a happy life or the things that improve your well-being are exercise, sleep, and good quality sleep, and seeing the people you love. These are all things that your body allows you to do. So have a think about that. Next time your body, you're questioning your body and looking at what it looks like or how you want to change it, try and move your focus from what does it look like to ask yourself, what can I do to care for my body today? The other part of this, your body is there because it can lead you to pleasure and joy. So ask yourself, what can I do for my body that makes me feel good? Focus on that, not what it looks like or comparing to other bodies. Ask yourself, what can I do today that feels good, that brings my body pleasure, whatever that looks like for you. And the last part of this is about challenging those self-critical thoughts. So if you're having critical thoughts about your body, a few things you can do. One is write those thoughts down on a bit of paper and just look down at them and remind yourself that thoughts are not facts, that these thoughts aren't necessarily true. They're there for a reason, maybe because of the environment around you, but these thoughts are not necessarily true. So write them down. Notice that they're not true. Scrunch up that bit of paper, throw it behind you. It doesn't make the thoughts go away, but it starts to allow you to get a bit distance from them, to start to question them a little bit, to start to realize they're not true, just a little bit can really help. And as I mentioned before, with those thoughts, another way to change them is change the way you talk about other people's bodies. So try and, when people around you and you want them to feel good, try and give them a compliment about their achievements or something they're doing with their life or what they mean to you as a friend. comment on those things rather than on what they look like. And that can really start to cause a cultural change and a change for you that will change the way you might feel about your body as well. So there's a few ideas in there about, seeing the brain and body as one, and also maybe how we can reach this place of body acceptance, where we're really not focusing on what our body looks like or wanting to change our body, but instead focusing on what we can do to make our body feel good and what maybe we can do to care for our bodies today.
Amazing. I've been madly taking notes while you've been talking, and I keep kind of circling back to this idea of language and the words we use and the words we could use instead, or at least really pinning down some of the phrases that make us feel crappy. So I wondered if we could just do a kind of quick list of some of the common things that people say about bodies, either our own or each other's, that we could maybe just put out here, pin down to this video, and encourage people to reflect on. For me, it's when people in exercise classes say things like, okay, we're going to get your body into shape, that immediately I can't enjoy a movement class if the tone is like that, because I'm like, I'm not here to punish my body. What are some of the things for you that you would like to pin down here and get people to reflect on?
Yeah, very similar. The idea of being summer body ready. I hate this idea that your body is ready for something. Your body is already ready. Yeah. This idea that your body needs to look a particular way or have a particular shape in order for you to have a good time. And I think that's the major one that I'd love to challenge, is this idea that if my body looked a particular way, that my life would be better.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, I sit with hundreds of clients over my life of all ages. I used to be a high school psychologist. Now I work a lot with adults as well. And I can tell you that no matter, you can work for your body to look a particular way. You can work for it to, fit into some sort of idea you have of what a body looks like. And you will still experience shame and guilt and anger and anxiety. There's this idea that changing our body leads to a great life. I think it's really useful to sort of challenge that idea, because I think that's what really forces people, makes people strive to work. We keep exercising to change our body shape. And I think a lot of the ways I try and help people to view the opposite there is, try and think about exercise or food, try and think about it as something that you can do that brings your body pleasure now, or, something that, exercises, what is it doing for you right now, like the dopamine hit or helping you process stress, rather than this idea that exercise is something that we do to change the shape of our body, or which is going to make our life better. And I think I really love to sort of hold that idea out and really be critical of it.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things in that I would like to pick up on. Firstly, there's that idea that somebody else gets to tell us what our body should be like. I feel like so many of the problematic frameworks that make us feel bad about our bodies are either desire, somebody saying you are obliged to be desirable and a desirable body looks like this, so get to work, or comparison, that we feel that our body isn't as good as other people's bodies. And so intellectually, my brain kind of says, okay, well, surely the solution to that is doing more things for ourselves, doing more things that feel good. When I was a teenager, though, even if I had known that, and I don't know if I did know that as a teenager, but even if I'd known that, I don't think I would have had the slightest idea how to unlearn all of that noise to try to figure out what feels good in my own body. Any tips?
Yeah, I think unlearning is a really useful way to think about it. And one thing to consider is a teenage mind, your mind right now maybe, that is a mind that is really ready to keep changing, and the way that we change our mind, or the way we change our thoughts, is actually to begin to really notice where some of those negative thoughts come from, and to be really critical of the environment around us that might be encouraging us to think a particular way. So one tip for that, I suggest people, you look at their social media and maybe think about, am I following people based on what they look like, based on, who they are or the values they have that are meaningful to me? Because it's really insidious, and we don't really realize how much the hours that we spend on social media looking at people based on what they look like really trains our brain to compare. Social media is built on comparison, and these things are, these kind of apps are all built to kind of keep you on there for as many hours as possible, and they're built to sort of force us to look at lots of different bodies that might lead to comparison. So try and do a stock take of your social media and change it to maybe less based on what people look like and more based on friends or people who share your values. I think the other thing to consider is looking out at advertising and media and notice, and to kind of go behind the curtain of what it's trying to do. I think we can notice that a lot of the time advertising, all it does is try and tell you that you are missing something in your life or there is something wrong with you. And if you buy this, it will make that better. And when you can start to notice that, I think it allows you to look at advertising in a different way, or look at magazines in a different way, where you can start to realize, oh, they're doing it again. They're telling me that this thing is wrong with me, this thing is wrong with my body, and that if I buy this, my life will be better. And just start to notice it. So you can just sort of laugh at advertising and be like, oh God, they're just doing that thing again, where they're trying to make me feel bad about my body, so I buy something. And I think the more we can notice these external things, it allows us to kind of interrupt that process of them changing the way we think, because we can actually start to notice, the impact they're having right at the time we're seeing them.
Yeah. I mean, God, we're trying to be sold so many things all the time. I teach a course on writing for magazines, and there's a lot of literature that refers to people as the product for sale in advertising structures in magazines. And I think that recognizing the way that we're being exploited in those arenas is really useful to break those patterns. When it comes to uncertainty and having the answers, it does feel like so much messaging is around control and power, and the fact that, if we were only more disciplined, or only, even better at being body positive, for example, is about being somehow stronger willed. And there's a beautiful quote that's at the beginning of your book, or in the foreword, where you talk about leaning into uncertainty. What areas of uncertainty can we get better at leaning into when it comes to bodies?
I think really focusing on the body for what it is actually brings a lot of uncertainty, because a lot of the time exercise, or we're sort of sold this idea that if we diet, if we exercise, that it makes everything really, have this clear future that's really, paved out for us. As long as we exercise and eat right, then our body's going to look like this, we're going to lose this weight, our body's going to change shape and look like this, and then we're going to get, love, a great job, we're going to get a great life. We're kind of sort of sold this really false sense of certainty that as long as we follow these rules, diet, exercise, we're going to get the life we want. And I think the opposite of that, and, I sort of understand why people want that, because uncertainty is difficult. Like, we want the certainty. We want to be told, oh, you just do this, this, and this, and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, here's the answer.
Here's the answer. Just do, and a lot of people make a lot of money on selling people this false sense of security, because in the end, life isn't certain, that just because you eat a certain way or exercise a certain way, it's not going to get rid of negative emotions. You don't know what the future's going to hold, And when it comes to health and body, when we think about disease, virus, when we think about the COVID pandemic, no one predicted any of these things. You can't predict what life's going to bring, and you can't predict what your health's going to be. All you can really focus on is the idea of what, my body today, what can I do for it today that makes it feel good? Not just to change what it looks like or exercising so in the future it's going to look good. Thinking that life should be about making life good today. Life should be about making life meaningful today. So asking those questions, what do I feel? Why does it make sense that I feel like that? And what do I need? I always ask those questions. And sometimes people want me to talk about, self-care and and these ideas as if I should tell you how you should look after your body, or that people ask me like, what should I do, to be happier? And I always say,
Give me the answers.
give me the, they want me, and I get it, because they want the certainty, but it's actually the other way around. It's actually, I don't want to give you the answers, but I want to give you permission to know that you can look to your body and you can listen to what it needs, and you can do what it takes to kind of get your body there. And I think the world is changing in this good way that we're seeing, especially a younger generation, teenage today, like, power to you, because we're seeing a younger generation actually rise up against, whether it be business or capitalism or government, that are sort of telling us that we need to work a particular way, or we need to, work between some hours, or we need to work, we're pushing back and we're saying, no, actually, my body, my neurodivergent mind, or my body that's different, I need this.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important part, to understand what you need by listening to your body, and then be able to advocate it, I think is a really important sort of shift we're seeing. And I think that's really going to be core to looking after our mental health and well-being in the future.
Yeah, it seems also, and this has come up across a few sessions, is the work that older generations need to do to be able to not change things for younger generations, but actually just give them the space to change things for themselves. And what resonates is this point in the book where you talk about how naturally play and movement and that unity between body and brain happen as a child, and then we go to school and we learn that there is sitting, listening and learning time and play time, and that then, carries on repeat for the rest of our lives. And it's funny because my kid is a real mover, and I often find myself saying, can you just sit down? And, I think as adults, how might we call ourselves out to make space for kids to be really honest about what they need, whether that's rest or support or movement or...
Yeah. I often say, if you want to look at how we should all live for good mental health and well-being, like, look at a child's playground of like 3 and 4 year olds. What you see is people playing. What you see is people, young 3 or 4 year olds, when they're tired, they'll let people know, then they'll sleep. When they're hungry, they'll let people know, and then they'll eat. I think younger kids haven't been trained out of listening to their body and what they need. When you're hungry, your body tells you. When you need sleep, your body tells you. And often they're given space to actually live like that. When those that are lucky enough to have really responsive caregivers around them will listen to those needs and really be able to give kids what they need. But then, we get to school and we're sort of trained, to listen to the teacher rather than our bodies. And I know a lot of teachers out there might not like me saying that, but noticing the difference that suddenly we get into schools and we're told that we need to go to school at this particular time. So we have to wake up at this particular time, or we can only eat when the bell goes. Suddenly we get put into these kind of structures this is the way life should be. And it really doesn't ever end. From school, often we go into jobs that tell us, our job tells us when we can eat or when we can take holidays, or, maybe we learn to force ourselves to work within sort of a capitalist kind of society that we're in, where productivity and making money is often seen as the paramount. We often force ourselves to work even if we're tired, or worse, force ourselves to work even if we're sick. And the only way you do that is by tuning out of your body. And if you do that enough over time, you really disconnect or dissociate from your body and your needs. And I think that's where a lot of adults end up. And hope, young people listening to this today, like, try to stay connected to your body and what it needs. Try to advocate for those needs and ask for those needs. Because I think a lot of where, adults I see in practice and in my life and myself and my friends, we have learned how to disconnect from body in order to work. And that has a cost. And we think just because we can do it, that it's okay, that we should do it. Just because you can force yourself to work, even though you're tired and stressed, doesn't mean it's not having a cost. It's just that those costs, I think, are depression and anxiety and burnout and the things that we're hearing time and time again that people are, really dealing with today. I often say burnout is the last step, and your body has probably been telling you for years that you need rest, for years that you need to live differently.
Yeah.
But it's not until it starts screaming that sometimes we take action, when really we need to be taking that action a lot earlier by tuning into our bodies and what we need.
Yeah. It's like learning to say no. And even that notion of doing things, like what did you do on the weekend? So it's even that idea that we are either working at a job work or we're working at life work.
Yeah, work and play. Think about that's where it starts at school. You have work and play, and we travel it.
We do both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You do homework. It's work at home.
Yeah.
Where's home play? And I work a lot with adults about how do we bring pleasure and play and fun back into your life. If you want to be happier, I often say, well, first, let's start with doing more in your life that brings you joy and noticing. And this, again, is why it's helpful to separate between brain and body. Is often the reason we don't do things that bring us pleasure or joy is because our mind is telling us we're not allowed to, or we can't.
Or we'll look silly.
Or people are going to think we're weird, or no, we have to work today. We have all these thoughts and beliefs that tell us we're not allowed to do the things that bring us joy and pleasure. Noticing that you can do things even when your brain tells you shouldn't, I think is a really difficult but really useful skill that we can all have. And I do this all the time when I'm, going into teach a lecture, or when I'm going to workshop and I'm feeling stressed. My body is often telling me, don't do this. Or my brain is saying, they think you're an idiot. Don't go to there. Don't say that thing. Don't go and do that talk. No one's going to listen. No one's going to be there. But I always kind of notice my thoughts, and I do this thing, still do it today, where I go, thanks, brain, but I'm going to do this anyway. And I think that skill is really important to remember, that even when your thoughts are telling you can't, or you're too tired, or you're not motivated, you can listen to your body and know, hang on, but is my body capable of doing this right now?
Yeah.
And often the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no, and maybe you should rest. But often the answer is, yeah, this thing is meaningful to me. So I'm going to allow space for my emotions, notice my thoughts. Thanks, brain. But I'm going to do this anyway because it's meaningful and important.
Yeah, that's right. And also that idea of giving yourself permission to look and even be silly.
Yeah.
So what if somebody thinks this is silly? Yeah. Who cares?
Absolutely.
Silly is fun. I mean, I used to, when I was in high school, and this is slightly different, but one of the things that turned me off of exercise was the thought that I wasn't strong enough to exercise. So I'd be so concerned about looking silly at being out of breath that I just wouldn't do it. And so, of course, then my lungs never, increased capacity, and I was always out of breath when I was exercising. But just the thought of being able to lean into it and go, I might fall over. I might look a bit silly. I might forget what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
That is okay, because it gives other people the permission also to let go, to look silly, to laugh, to do what they need to do.
Yeah, focusing on pleasure. Sometimes people think if you focus too much on pleasure, that it's going to end up with you just watching TV and eating chocolate and pizza every day. It doesn't. When you tune in with your body and what brings its pleasure, you don't do things that are unhealthy for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, because your body tells you, this isn't working for us. It gets when you focus on what brings your body pleasure, what happens is you end up finding the exercise that works for you, whether that be dance, or just going for a walk out in a beautiful park, or using some app to ride some bike and pretend you're in Paris like my mum does. Whatever it is, when you focus on pleasure, that's when you find because when I say exercise, it's got a bit, that word has
do the exercise.
We exercise, so many people, clients come in and they want to get a gym membership and go to the gym because we're kind of told that's the exercise you should do. And I always try and take that, back a step and say, well, why do you want to go to the gym? And it's often because their body's telling them they need to do movement, they need to exercise. But it doesn't have to be the gym. It might just be a walk, or, dance, or these things that are often silly. And when you are laughing and enjoying exercise, obviously that's going to be the time when you actually stick to it. When you are forcing yourself to go to the gym at 6 a.m. every morning, that has a use by date, you
Yeah.
know. So find the movement, you know, that brings you pleasure, and that's much more likely to be able to maintain.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, training your body to hate something every day, it's like, how do we think that that is
It's good in the
going to
long
make
term.
us feel good in the long run, that suddenly we'll wake up and be like, actually, I love this feeling of despair and self-loathing.
It
It's
doesn't
great.
happen. You don't just suddenly start loving the thing that
Yeah,
you hate over
exactly.
time. No.
Yeah. We've almost run out of time, but I do just want to like flip the switch and turn in a different direction very quickly, because one of the things that's come up a lot across this series, particularly with relation to body image, is the idea of girls and bodies, because, you know, a lot of statistics do show huge and very alarming rates of body dissatisfaction and various eating disorders, eating disordered behaviours, and body image concerns with teenage girls in particular. But I do also feel that, and you would have experience of this, particularly having worked in high school psychology, like, what are young men feeling about their bodies, and how do we make sure that everybody is included in our conversations around body acceptance and body neutrality?
I think it's about remembering, you know, when I keep talking about the expectations we put on body and the comparisons, you know, they're made both on weight and shape, you know, and when we start thinking about that, that's when we can really start, I think, to acknowledge what the experience of a lot of men, you know, or young men is really about. It's this pressure to have a body that has a particular shape, but also a particular weight. And you, just like I said before, you only have to look at social media and, you know, the media around to kind of you know, we look at it differently because it's men's bodies, but when you start looking at them with a bit more of a critical eye, the expectations are the same. You know, there's this sense of, if you have a beer gut, or you know, you have a dad body, you know, there's these ideas that you need to change that body, and that when you turn on the TV screens, you're seeing a lot more bodies that are of that particular muscle kind of shape, but the response to that expectation is quite different. You know, rather than men are less likely to maybe stop eating or to really restrict their food, what you see is men maybe are more likely to exercise more than is healthy, or they're more likely to maybe injure themselves at the gym because they're you know, exercising beyond their capacity. Or you know, in really young men, and also, you know, you're seeing a lot of, you know, steroid use or growth hormones. You're seeing these sorts of things are sometimes also come from a disordered way of looking at body or body image. And I think the major benefit of the focus on changing body image for women and young women, and the increased you know, understanding about that, I think the good thing there is a lot more women and young, you know, girls and are talking about their bodies and trying to talk about what it is to have a positive body image, or talking about, you know, advertising that is, you know, that's not helping with people in their body image. That's caused a huge amount of conversation for women, mostly around body. The problem that I'm seeing for men is already young men have trouble talking about their emotions anyway, or are kind of told that, you know, they shouldn't talk about their emotions, or they should just be strong. But the other thing is, there's not a lot of space for men to talk about how they feel about their body. And when we don't have space to talk about something, it means that it just kind of festers. It just stays there, and it gets stronger and stronger and more negative and negative. So I think the number one thing we can do is to acknowledge that, you know, people of all genders experience self-critical thoughts about their body. And what we need to do is create space for people to talk about that. People know that it's normal, but also, you know, create space, especially for men and young men, because they don't have the space as much. What can we do to create the space for them to be able to talk about their body, how they're feeling about their bodies, to each other, and maybe to professionals, or to people that can really help them challenge some of those negative thoughts they're having about their body? Because in the end, no matter your gender, the weight and shape of your body should never be the focus. You know, we've got to move the focus more to, no, you're great. Your body is there. Your body is doing amazing things for you. And how can we focus on caring for your body and what you need?
I have so much more that I would like to talk about, but we have run out of time, and that seems like a lovely note to finish on as well. So do you have a question that you can leave our audience with to continue talking for the rest of their day?
I think as I sort of keep talking about that, most important question I think is tuning into your body and saying, what am I feeling and what do I need? I think that's the most, and I add that extra one, what am I feeling? Why does it make sense that I feel like that? And what do I need? But so our lives are set up in a way that we don't create a lot of space to check in with our bodies and what we need. So I think if you can create that space to ask those questions, I think that can make a real difference to not only your mental health, but your physical health, your health as a whole.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah. See you next lunch orders, everybody.
Thank you. So lovely to be here.